Well, everyone, I am delighted to welcome Josh Perry to the Storybox podcast today. Now, Josh, you are a BMX bike rider that has appeared in several X Games, and you've been through quite a journey. Now, before I didn't want to read out your entire bio because I just felt it necessary for you to share it and for it to come from you, essentially. But before we dive into that, I just want to welcome you to the Storybox today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate you connecting and reaching out and giving me the opportunity to share.
It's an absolute pleasure, my friend. I want to do this interview a little bit differently to what I normally do other interviews for, because this one I believe is very, very important for a lot of people to hear, and you guys listening will know exactly why shortly. But for those of you who don't know who Josh Perry is, you're about to find out. But before I ask you, I guess, your backstory, I have one question that I normally ask people. Now, I didn't really prepare set questions. I wanted this to be as organic as I possibly could. But the one question that I did prepare that I always ask everybody is, what is your definition of success?
To me, success is just doing what you want and being healthy and happy along the way and helping other people.
Where did it come from for you? Was it more or less like a gradual thing over time, or was there more like a catalyst moment somewhere along the line?
I feel like it wasn't very clear to me until being diagnosed with a brain tumor after a crash, which is the shift in my story. And from there, it just opened my eyes to what was important beyond just my own terms of survival and success. And that's kind of where it started.
Wow, man. So you touched on the brain tumor there for a moment, but before we dive into that section of your life, which is quite important, did you always want to be a BMX rider?
No, that started when I was about 13. My dream, I grew up in sports, baseball and basketball were my favorite to play, and the ones I played in school and on teams. And so there was some point where it shifted along the journey to wanting to become, a basketball player. I wanted to go to UNC Chapel Hill, North Carolina. That's where Michael Jordan went. And I wanted to be in the NBA one day and all that stuff. And then got exposed to skateboarding and rollerblading, action sports, about 11, 12 or so. And then noticed BMX bikes could ride in the same ramps, and saw it on X Games one year and got a BMX bike for Christmas, my 13th Christmas. Right after, my birthday's in November, so it was right after that. And actually, along the way, I was riding dirt bikes with my cousin, and I didn't have one myself, but he did. And so on the weekends, I'd ride with him. And I got a BMX bike because my parents couldn't afford a dirt bike. And that's what, propelled me to where I am today. So I'm super grateful for that because, I'm like 5'9", so I don't know if the NBA would have worked out the way I wanted to. And then, I wanted a dirt bike. Next best thing was a BMX bike, and, it's taken me around the world, and it's literally and figuratively saved my life.
I'm 5'7", man, so I completely understand what you mean by the height aspect of wanting to play basketball, but not kind of reaching that height aspect. But man, I was a power forward in school. That was my game. They called me the garbage collector because I used to just pick up all the trash in terms of the rebounds, the offensive boards, defensive boards, and just be an absolute bruiser on the court. And I was only a little guy. I wasn't exactly the biggest, but I just out hustled and outworked everybody on the court. But alas, I am short. Probably wouldn't have worked out for me in terms of that career. But I'm curious to know, for you, when you picked up the BMX bike, what was it about the BMX riding that you loved more than basketball? Or what sort of changed your perspective on, hey, I can actually do this more than I can with basketball?
There's just so many elements, like the freedom of travel, not having a license at the time, obviously, but being able to just ride away to my friend's house or ride to the bike and skate parks or just go to go anywhere. It was like a sense of freedom to me. I grew up with a really rough childhood with, a stepfather who was abusive. And so being able to put my energy into something creative and at my own pace, I could set my own goals consciously and unconsciously. I could travel, I could just escape. And it was, all the aggression I had, for the most part, I was able to release it in something But then the other aspects of like setting these goals and falling and falling and falling. People talk about failure. If you never played a sport, you're going to have a different definition of failure than an athlete of any kind, or a musician or an artist, someone. And I argue most people, or majority of people, if not everyone, because to do something, you have to fall down, figuratively speaking, pick yourself up again, and then go until you get it. And then progression as a human being. So there was that sense of satisfaction, that, gratification from, trying a trick and falling, the pain physically and mentally, but the determination to land it because it was something you saw someone else do and you wanted to do it. So it was like that drive and that feeling once you land that trick. And I've taken years to land tricks, even in my professional career, many injuries or, things like that. And it's just like, there's no better feeling than like trying, of any part of life, trying to accomplish something and then accomplishing it and then being like, wow, all right, what's next? And so that was another element that stood out to me a lot, was just, setting these goals and then the feeling of accomplishing those goals and then progressing to what's next.
When you did your first failure, as you call it, and you didn't make your first landing, why did you want to get back up and do it again? What made you want to keep going?
Well, at the time, it was just something I wanted to do. But now reflecting and, the knowledge I have, it was just my vision was greater than my circumstances. So the thing that I saw in my mind that I wanted so bad outweighed the temporary pain. And I've become a big fan of Eric Thomas over the last year or so, someone that's, to me, as an aspiring speaker, a lot of inspiration and motivation comes from him. And he talked about on his podcast the other day or the other week, it was like delayed gratification. And that's something that I feel like the kids growing up today, and even my generation, like don't really understand that. But because I had that athletic background and that, action sports, it's really painful. You get tackled, it's painful, but when you fall 15, 20 feet to the flat ground from your bike, that hurts. But yeah. I think that instilled so much in me moving forward today that, it's tough. I mean, we're humans, we're designed to suffer because we set these desires, and if we don't have them now, we get frustrated, we get anxious, we get stressed. But I think that aspect of BMX helped me understand things that I want aren't going to come right now. In order to get it, I have to put the work in. Yeah.
You mentioned there for a moment that your father was very abusive growing up. And I think we need to touch on this a little bit, because with all the issues that are happening with the world right now, it seems to be because of coronavirus. I didn't want to bring this up, but I think it's so powerful. There's been an increase in mental and physical abuse. Was your father more of the physical or the mental side of abuse for you?
So to be clear, my father, he's been in my life, my entire life. He was not the abusive one. My brother's dad, who my mom married when I was about 3, I'd say. Yeah. So I grew up with him. So, mental and physical to my brother, myself, and my mom. Later learned that he was bipolar, had a drug and alcohol problem. And then, getting into the NLP, emotional intelligence, that type of work today, and researching that, I actually just went through an exercise with my coach of, writing a letter to, forgive my stepfather for all the anger and, all the negative emotions I held on to, but then asking for my forgiveness for judging him because I don't know his past. So, but yeah, growing up, I mean, it was really interesting to see the route my brother and I took moving forward. Because to me, I had this model of my father who I idolized at the time. I wanted to be like him, that he still plays sports today. He's almost 60 years old. And I grew up in that sports mindset. And so I played all the sports and I wanted to be like my dad. But he taught me how to be a compassionate person. And the one time he ever spanked me, and I'll remember this for the rest of my life, I was about 9 years old and I was staying with him for a year because things in my household, my stepfather got so bad I stayed with my dad for a year, and there was one time I misbehaved and he spanked me, and he came back in 15 minutes later crying, apologizing, and he just like spanked me on the ass, typical, but he was so heartbroken. And that was the last day that, or the only, one and only time anything like that ever happened. But from how he interacted with my mom, my stepmom, who they've been together almost 20 years now, his friends, I witnessed both sides of the spectrum of who is a man, an adult that I wanted to become. And I had that choice. So I had this pain that I wanted to escape, but I also had this model of who I wanted to be like. And so, reflecting now, it's always easier to reflect in the past, but that's been a part of my work. My inner work is, what can I learn from these past events? Like, what is the good in these, which is super challenging. But then, as you mentioned now, with what we're seeing, there's a lot of abuse happening. And I don't think it's ever been any different. I think actually Joe Rogan was just talking about this. We're able to see so much because of our phones and the internet, that information travels. And it's not like, actually, no, it was Russell Brand. I was listening to his podcast today. He had some, he's amazing. And he had this professor out of the UK speaking about racism. And the guy was like, what we just witnessed, was horrific. But it's nothing new. The only difference now is someone captured it on film and made it real for the majority of us that either can't relate to that, or just didn't believe it, or just we didn't see it. But now it's so much more real because we can see it. And I think that's something that's really interesting right now. What we're seeing is we're able to witness behavior. Like right here, I live out in Raleigh, North Carolina, or right outside in Durham, North Carolina. And just last night, and they're already staging another protest right now that turns into a riot. We have so much anger and sadness, and it's manifesting. And people talk about, the world's so heavy right now. It's so negative and so dark. We just need more positivity and light. And it's like, it's always been there. It's just what we choose as society to share and to see. And as human beings, we're hardwired to be addicted to that stress and that drama, because that means survival, whether we're conscious of it or not. And I think that's what's happening right now. And so for me to have gone through my own traumas and to have these perspectives on it, I try to take that, kind of open-mindedness approach and just think about the pain that maybe someone's going through or have gone through to be acting in that manner. And that's my part of trying to be responsible, is trying to be responsible in how I react. And that's a huge mission to take on. But I'm really grateful for how young I've been throughout this journey. When I was 21, when I got told I may or may not wake up, whether I had the surgery or not. And so the last 10 years of my life has been, exploring the self-development, growth and development world. And I'm very fortunate to have experienced that. But I think that's all we're seeing today. It's just, there's a light being shined on what was there that people either didn't know or just wanted to, kind of push away because they didn't want to believe that, things are that horrific happening.
Yeah. I remember reading a couple of books on this very, very topic in the first place. It is nothing new. The only thing that is new is the fact that people are sharing it a lot more. And the digital age is quite a very negative age as well, if you choose it to be. So it always comes back to that choice of, okay, yes, this information is out here for me to look at and for me to digest. But if I'm going to digest it and think that this is the be all and end all, that's going to just affect my emotions, and it's going to make more of an impact on me than it is somebody else. So you have a choice to make whether or not what is happening in the world is all doom and gloom and you want to think it like that, or if you want to spin that around and make it real for your life, be very mindful of it, but don't allow it to affect your relationship with other people. Don't allow it to affect your own positivity, your own energy, because that's important. And I think we're seeing what's going on in the world is very, very interesting, because it's a more heightened awareness of what is happening. Whereas before, everyone could just think they could swipe it under a rug and no one would care, no one would do anything about it. But now you've got ample ability, like, to try and achieve justice, or what the law claims as justice, not real actual justice. It always comes down to okay, well, what is it really? Like, is it actually arresting the man that killed another person? Or, all these questions that people are asking themselves, what is it? And I think we're just seeing a lot of it just play out in today's society, which is very interesting to see, but it's also very scary in a sense that you got young people looking at this and not actually knowing what to do with the information. And so it affects their mentality, it affects the way they see the world, it affects the way they treat people at the same time. So it has a flow-on effect, and which is why I try and talk about this as much as possible and try and speak to young people that, look, if you are struggling with social media, first and foremost, get off it. Just detach yourself from it, because all that negativity, you are what you put into yourself. As cliche as that may sound, it's cliche because it's true. But what you're talking about, Josh, you had a choice to make. I mean, you saw how your stepfather treated your mother, your brother, and yourself. And you had a choice whether or not you wanted to go down the same road, which you could have. And I'm curious to know, man, why you didn't in the first place. I'm always curious about that. And we'll get back to that in a moment, sorry. And then more or less like trying to think of things that are actually going to help you in your life, because it's not an easy job. Because you are right, we are conditioned to think negatively. We are conditioned to do all the evil things. That's just in our nature. And it is a constant struggle daily to do the right thing. So for you, man, seeing all this negativity around you growing up and having to be part of it, why didn't you choose to go down that road?
Well, it's like you said, we have a choice, and we often don't understand that we have a choice. And for me, like I said, I had my father and my mother and the majority of people in my life that were very supportive, very loving. And so to me, that weighed more on against the temporary pain I was experiencing for someone I did not respect and did not care for. I did at one point, but that's a part of someone being bipolar and manipulative, is at points growing up, he was my best friend, I just wrote about that. And it was super eye-opening to reflect on that point. But moving forward, there was this vision in my head, this ideal version of how I wanted to be, how other people were treating me, and then experiencing and becoming conscious of what that felt like and what that did for me and what that did to propel me towards my goals. And so I made an unconscious choice at the age that I wanted to pursue this path of becoming a BMX athlete, which led me to dropping out of high school, moving 13 hours south to North Carolina to train with Dave Mira, my idol, and became a mentor and a friend of mine, a competitor, things like that. But I think it was just the positivity and how that felt that led me down that path, because it just outweighed the negativity that was temporary. And so, like you said earlier, we do have a choice. And when it comes to social media, when it comes to the media in general, which is nothing but toxic crap, we have that choice. And for me, I learned along the way, man, like I'm watching something and it's triggering this limiting belief or this anger or this guilt or this resentment or this jealousy. I don't like it. So I'm gonna stop following that person. And then it became like, all right, I'm getting a lot of feedback in a positive way from watching. And to be honest, back in 2013, Joe Rogan was one of the first people that I took on as a virtual mentor, as I refer to them. Like just the content, the words, and the perspective. I was like, man, like there's something to this. This is amazing. And that led me down, the nutrition route and the people I learned from there. And then like Dr. Joe Dispenza, like 4 years ago, and like all these amazing thought leaders in their own worlds. It became that choice that I recognized that I want to follow these people, whether that's on social media, that's a book or whatever, like, because it makes me feel good, it inspires me, and it's shifting my thoughts and the way I think. But like I said, also the catalyst to all that was to being conscious to it and actually pursuing changing my identity as a human being and what I did on a daily basis, what I felt, what I thought, how I showed up and treated other people, was being 21 and being told my life was going to go away. I had a shot, but it is still a chance it may go away. That woke me up. And I refer to it like as my wake-up calls. It was the 3 different brain tumor diagnoses over the last 10 years, blowing out my knee, like going through depression, like being broke, like all these things. reflecting on them now, it's something that I try to encourage others is to look through the lens of my life, to not have to be forced to change your perspective. But like Dr. Joe says, like choose out of joy and inspiration to change how you view the world, not pain and suffering. Like I went through pain and suffering, literally almost lost my life a few times and actually flatlined. I hit my head so hard at the contest that I woke up in an ambulance. But I don't want people to go through those things, and I don't think they need to. I think I needed to because I was that stubborn and I was able to overcome and share it with other people. Mm-hmm. And that's something I take very, very serious is I didn't just go through all the stuff I've gone through just to keep it for myself. And your first question, what does success mean to me? That's what success means to me is take care of myself, be healthy and happy. But it's not just by myself. I want my friends, my family, and strangers to experience the same thing because part of spirituality is understanding we're all connected and we're connected to the earth. We're connected to the universe. Like, it doesn't matter what religion you follow or what beliefs you have. Like, we are all connected. And at the core of every belief of, spirituality or religion or anything, it's that. And that's just something that I want other people to experience. And I went through the hard way and I was able to, and I'm able to laugh about it. I'm able to take joy from that. I'm able to take wisdom from that and not make those same mistakes. Not saying I'm not going to make mistakes, but the ones I know of, I'm not going to make them. And I want other people to experience that too, because to me, that's success. And it's not about getting to the top and being by yourself, figuratively speaking, whatever that means to you. It's about enjoying those wins with other people and seeing them win as well.
I love that, man. And it's so true. I think in failure as well, because it sounds like you've had a lot of failures and I have myself in my own life, which has taught me one main thing, which is very, very important that a lot of people need to understand today, that in failure, you learn humility and bringing you to a state of realization that you're not better than somebody else, that you're still a human being, that there are people out there that do know more than you, and just being willing and open enough to accept reality for what it actually is, which is the hardest thing for a person to actually go through, is the acceptance process. It's like the stages of grief, like you go through a failure, you feel crap about yourself, you get denial, anger, the whole bit. And the hardest one out of all those, I've always found to be accepting how it is, because we don't want to accept it. It's like we're hit with it like a ton of bricks and we don't know how to respond to it properly. But then when it hits us, we're almost like, well, I don't want to accept that because that hurts. And it's gone, or it's a loss of a friend, or we've been in utter pain. Pain's inevitable. But the amazing thing is it's our choice and our reaction to that pain that determines the outcome, determines where we go from that. And I've known so many people, man, I don't know about you, but the moment they hit failure, they crumble. Like there's no way for them to get out of it. And they get stuck in this massive routine that the moment they get a little bit of a win, they fall right back into the failure again. And they just are constantly climbing for that little bit, but just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. It's almost like they're sinking further into the ocean and they're constantly climbing and climbing or swimming to the surface. But they can't reach the surface. They can't get any air. But understanding that that's okay. It's part of life, and doing the best that you possibly can in whatever failure you've experienced, to be positive, to know that it's going to be ultimately okay is the key, I think. So for you, man, I mean, just reading your bio the other day and even this morning as well, just reflecting on some of the things you've had to endure. I mean, you've had near-death experiences. You've been flatlined as well. How are you feeling in that moment when someone, basically you're faced with reality, you're faced with the fact that you are human? How are you feeling in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, in those moments, of course, you feel it. We're human. Like you feel the pain, you feel the hurt and the sadness and the fears. But something about, I think what we were speaking about that was lacking from it was where you were going was acceptance. The reason we don't accept that we failed, that we messed up or someone passed, or whatever it is, or we're sick. It's like, because once we accept it, it's real. And our brain, our ego, is hardwired to protect us from anything that is presenting discomfort. Yet we get in this cycle that we're addicted to the chemical emotions of fear, stress, and drama because that's comfortable. And so to accept reality is to then make a change or make a choice to change or not. Now, change is super hard because we get addicted to that comfort zone. And once you go to do something different, your body freaks out. It's like, well, I don't know this. And the ego steps in and protects you. But it's protecting you for something that's unknown, which is the majority of our population's problem right now. Is we're perceiving these fears and these stressors and these unwanted events that aren't real, but they trigger an emotion that is real, and our physiology changes, and then we don't act. So when it comes to failure, you have to accept that it wasn't a failure. You just tried something and you collected data. And that's what I refer to it as now. It's just you're collecting data along the way. And the more you do things, Kerwin Ray is one of my favorite virtual mentors, and I've actually got to hang out with him a couple of times and consider him a friend. And he's helped me understand this even more. Like, in order to grow, you have to have stress. In order to learn, you have to have failures. Once you can accept that and you can let go of the judgment that you're putting on yourself from other people because you're making it about you, then the rest is easy once you let go of that. And that's something too that I've come to learn is like, my fear of public speaking, ironically, making a career out of a public speaker today. It was always because I was worried about people judging me. I wasn't worried about what my mission, what I was trying to accomplish. And that's part of purpose. Simon Sinek's work about your why, your purpose, it's finding the purpose in what you're doing beyond yourself. Once you're worried about nothing besides the people you're trying to help, and if you're not clear on that, that's step one, is figuring out who you're trying to help besides yourself. Then the rest becomes easy. Fear is easier to handle and let go of. And that's a lot of the work I've been doing, in the inner world. It's about acceptance. And, you mentioned, the loss of a loved one. Like, my brother took his life 2 years ago, after 2 weeks after he turned 26. And then 2 years before that, my mentor, Dave Mira, took his life and was diagnosed with CTE. Those were two of the most devastating points in my life. Those were the most difficult points in my life. But accepting the reality and accepting that I don't want to feel like that anymore, and to feel like that moving forward is going to do them a disjustice, that was really hard to accept. But it's helped me in so many ways, and it's helped me honor them in more ways than me just feeling sorry for myself like I wanted to, because that's easy. Because that's what we know, and that's what the emotions are. But so I think at the end of the day, it comes down to acceptance. If you can accept your reality for what it is and not put meaning to it, or at least irresponsible meaning that's going to cripple you, then you can move forward. And it's like there is no, like, you can't change reality of current reality, but you can change moving forward. It's like bad things happen all the time. I have this excuse. I always talk about accountability and acceptance of your actions, and responsible. That's what that word breaks down to. And people always throw these dramatic experiences at me, like examples, like, what about someone that just gets into a car accident, or someone gets jumped or something? Yeah, that's reality, but you still have a choice moving forward. Okay. That happened. I've had bad shit happen to me over and over again, just like everyone else. But the difference is how you move forward, how you choose to consciously move forward and be aware of your unconscious thoughts, because that's where it starts. And if you set off those, I call it like subconscious alarms, that's step one, because then you realize what you don't want and what's happening, and then you can move forward because you understand where you are. You can make a plan moving forward.
So you mentioned there for a moment this idea of purpose, and for a young person sort of searching for their purpose, how long did it take you, or how long does it usually take for someone to actually find their purpose? Like, I know for me, it took me up until like last year for me to actually really find my purpose. And, I went through a period of life where I was lost for a long, long period of time. So what would you say to a young person that is lost and is trying to find their purpose? What would you say to them?
So I would just say, don't rush the process. For me, reflecting on what led me to my purpose was going through all the events, all like, at first it started, my purpose was just to satisfy self. It was fueled by spite and anger, but it was to leave the pain and suffering. and to make my dream happen. Again, fueled by spite and anger for the most part. And then, one brain tumor diagnosed after the other, I got really clear on what my purpose was and why this wasn't just happening to me, which is a human trait. We make meaning to things that happen in our lives. But to me, that meaning was to help other people, because I started to notice in 2010, after the first diagnosis, when I had surgery, got back riding, like I was actually riding like 5 weeks later, it was insane. Doing interviews, sharing that experience, so many people thanked me, and because it helped them do whatever it was, start something or get back into doing something at all ages beyond just BMX bike riding or action sports or sports. And then I started to notice the more I got interviewed, the more I shared, and the more I shared on my own, the more that kept happening. And then so each wake up call, as I refer to them as the brain tumor diagnosis, the third one was February 2017. I just came off my best year competing, and that was after an ACL reconstructive surgery, and was just like not even devastated at that point. I was just like, what do I do with this? Sorry, my dog, puppy's right behind me scratching himself. But I was like, I didn't even miss a beat when I got the news. I was like, all right, this is here to help me to help other people. Yeah. And that's when I walked away from competition. I decided to stop fulfilling or to stop living my current dream or my past dream for a new dream of mine, which I wasn't even aware that the whole time before I was inspiring people by just doing what I wanted to. I would challenge the status quo and the norm of what you should do after school, which I didn't even finish high school. I went on, finished later on. But that right there was inspiring people to change their perspective of what was possible for them. And then moving forward, I was like, all right, well, I can show people even more what's possible for them because I'm doing it today for myself. Mm-hmm. And so when someone's asking me, like, how do I find my purpose? It's like, start with you. It's the oxygen mask analogy. You can't help other people until you help yourself. So if you're not clear about your purpose, find what you enjoy doing and do it. And things are going to come. There's no like magic answer to this. It's about experience, which brings upon education, and that brings upon clarity. And the more you do things, the more you're going to get information from all your sensory input, and the more you're going to make connections and be like, one day it's going to hit you like it did for me. I hope for other people, it's my goal, they don't have to go through life-altering, devastating experiences to get that clarity. But sometimes it is. But think about how strong you're going to be after that. So to your original question, there's no, there's no magic answer. I think it's about as much experience as you can get, which is going to cause a lot of pain. A lot of, that's just part of the human journey. But I think that's the key, is the experience.
And it's about understanding that you got to ask questions and not be afraid to ask people questions, man, because that's how you learn. And, I think for me as well, growing up and me, if I was to reflect on my life, like my grandfather used to tell me all the time, he's like, if you don't ask, you don't get. Don't be afraid to ask someone a question. If someone doesn't have an answer for you, go and ask somebody else that might. If no one has an actual answer for your question, it is okay. But the process of actually searching out the answer to that question will make you learn in the first place. It is building up your confidence. It is making you actually think of things that are necessary for you to actually improve upon in your own life, which is like, why am I actually reaching out in the first place? I have a question. I'm building upon my purpose every step of the way. And the more you do that, the more questions you'll have. And that's just how I found my life to be, is the more questions I started asking, the more curious I was, and the more I started growing. Like doing this right now with you, man, I'm learning and I'm growing as a result from your story. So always going back to that is an important thing for a young person and understanding there is no shortcuts. There are no secret remedies, or I think everyone's sort of looking for that. They're always looking for the shortcut because they don't want to go through the pain. They don't want to go through the hard yards. And that's understandable, man, because it hurts. Like, it sucks. But understand that if we didn't go through the pain, we wouldn't be stronger, we wouldn't be better, and we wouldn't be the people that we are today. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, it's like, if you don't touch the stove, you don't know it's hot. So then you don't know that you shouldn't touch the stove. I mean, it's a simple analogy, but pain gives us information. And, you mentioned questions. Yeah, I think that's the actual number one thing, is ask questions. And then I didn't understand that till you mentioned it, reflecting, like, I call them virtual mentors. Like, I had so many questions because I was so aware of what I didn't want. So it's like, okay, I don't want this pain. I broke my leg. What do I want? Well, I should probably do that trick differently next time. And that's literally how you learn BMX tricks. Like, you watch, you observe, you ask yourself you have an inner dialogue, which you're probably not aware at the time, but reflecting now with all the work I've been doing to educate myself, I'm like, all right, I'm very aware of that. But that's where it started, with like reaching out. And a lot, I call them virtual mentors, which some I've been able to meet in person, which is amazing. But the reason why they're virtual mentors is because I couldn't ask them the questions I wanted to. So what did I do? I read their books. I listened to their podcasts. I watched their videos, whatever it was. I think that's everything. And that's why I think you and I share so much and ask these questions and talk with people, is because that's part of our purpose, is leaving behind a trail for other people to follow. So that point is brilliant, is questions. That's the inner dialogue you always have with yourself. You're not aware of, is how do I get to there? How do I get that? How do I not feel pain?
And not being afraid of rejection either. I think a lot of people are afraid of asking a question because they're afraid of rejection. But I think the worst they can say to you is no. And that's really it. But you go and find somebody else. That's okay. I want to ask you this question, man. What is your biggest fear currently, or what has been your biggest fear in the past as well?
So my biggest fear in the past, which is something I've been working on, is just not believing I'm good enough now that BMX is done. And there was still a sense of that in BMX. And I have no evidence of this, but it's just one of those fears from the ego, because I'm doing new things now. And that was, you mentioned it earlier, but like having this self-identity crisis type thing when I left BMX competition, which was, I officially accepted that just like last year, but it was 2017 I didn't compete. My last contest was October 2016. Throughout the last few years since then, I just was like going through that change, and how terrible that felt, because I wasn't training the way I was used to. I wasn't just on a plane to compete. I wasn't doing this. So it was a lot of like, who am I? All these things. And so today it's about being conscious of those things and what do I want moving forward? And I actually just lost track of what you actually just asked, because that sparked that memory of you saying that, like not knowing who you were at some point and just coming clear in your purpose now. And that's something I went through, which I don't think people understand, that like where I was, where I am today, like there was, and I write about it a lot. But there was a of pain in the change, but I'm grateful for it now.
100%, man. Like if I was to look back on the person that I was in 2015, 2016, 2017, very different person, very angry person, not satisfied, not happy, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Really, I was kind of angry at a lot of people when I shouldn't have been. I think I was more deep down inside. I was just angry at myself for not being confident enough, for not asking enough questions, for not just, putting myself out there a little bit more and actually doing something that I really, really wanted to do. And so I was sort of coasting through life a little bit and had this very addictive nature to certain things. Like we can touch on it a little bit, but nutrition as well. I didn't understand that. So fitness became sort of my God, my idol, because I could control that. And that led me down a very dark road of not being able to just be happy and be content with who I was as a person. I didn't know. I was like, who is Jay Phantom? Like, seriously, I have no clue who I am, because, you go through school for 13, 14 years, and the moment you leave, it's almost like, well, what do I do now? And it's like, I'm in the big wide world now. I've got all these questions that they're not being answered, and I'm lost. Like I'm a sponge, and I want to soak up the information, but I can't. It's like when you leave it out to dry. That was me. And I wasn't soaking anything up. And it was partly because I didn't want to as well. And no one was like there to help me. Or I had those people that were sort of draining me out and leaving me out to dry as well. So that analogy is sort of when I realized that moment, which is only last year actually, when I sort of woke up. It was like this instantaneous moment where it was like, what the hell am I doing? You know? And I began the hard process, and it's day in and day out, man. Like it's a constant reminder of why. You go back to your why and you tell yourself, well, I don't want to go back to this. So this is why I'm going this way. And it's constantly like refocusing your energy, refocusing your mindset into the good things and your why every single day. Yeah.
100%. I mean, it's a daily practice. You don't just go to the gym once and then you're set for the next 2 months. Like, you got to put the work in.
I wish.
Everyone does. Yeah,
man. But
for sure.
For you, man, you've been through, I believe it is 5 tumor recoveries. Like, we haven't really even begun to touch on, I guess, your mindset during that period of time and what actually happened and how you went through the recovery process. So are you able to give people a sort of a brief overview?
Yeah. So first diagnosis came from a head injury that led to an MRI to check for TBI that accidentally found it. And to give perspective, if you look at my Instagram, somewhere in there, I got to post another photo of it soon, but the MRI is on there, and it was 8 or so centimeters long by 4 wide and 4 deep. And a year to a year and a half prior, I had classic symptoms, and I kept getting denied a scan every time I asked for an X-ray, CAT scan, MRI, something. I didn't know. I just said, there's something wrong. I need a scan. I had health insurance, all that good stuff, but they just kept writing me off and giving me pain pills, sending me home, and told me to come back if I need more. And I trusted them because I was like, you're the doctor. I don't know anything. So at that point, leading up to the first diagnosis, I accepted pain and suffering as my life. And just like anything, I was, all right, it's what I got to do. Like, I'm at that point, I was 3 years into my professional career, just rode X Games, was a couple of years on the Do Tour, paying sponsors, traveling literally around the world at this point. And I was like, all right, well, it's just what I got to do. Like, all right. And that's when my drinking habit actually started, because I noticed every 2, 3, 4 drinks, the pain would start subsiding because the pressure was being relieved. And that developed, on top of the already party mindset of living in a college town in North Carolina. Didn't go to college, but partied after we rode, and we still got up, hungover or not, and we trained, but that was the first diagnosis experience, or leading up to it. Now, when I first got diagnosed, I was devastated. I explain it as like an out-of-body experience. Like, you watch a movie and the bad news comes on, or like a war scene or something, and like the video, slow-mos, there's ringing in the ringing noise in the ear that kicks in, and everything's just like time stands still. It's like, this can't be happening. And like, that's how I felt about that moment. But it was my life, not a movie. And I was just like looking down on myself, and just all I heard, the doctor had explained it, there's no swelling, no bleeding. So I checked out. And I remember standing up and like, all right, cool. So when can I ride? Like, 2 weeks? And he was like, no, like, it's a little bit more serious than that. Can you sit down? And then he went on to say, well, you had an abnormal scan. I was like, all right, what does that mean? Did I move? Because I know I twitch when I sleep, or I'm falling asleep. Like, do we have to do it again? Because I know you can't move in MRIs. He's like, no, there's something that showed up on the report that, there's something in your brain that shouldn't be there. And I remember laughing. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I clearly can't put anything in my head. So what could be there? And he's like, well, at this point, we don't know if it's benign or cancerous, but we do know that this growth shouldn't be there. And if you want a shot at living, you have to have surgery immediately to remove it. There's still a chance you may die. You just be prepared. You'll probably never ride your bike again. And so to me, all I heard was cancer. You may die, never gonna ride your bike again. And that's all it took. And then just the ringing in my ears, just that kicked in. I just started lifting out of my seat. And I remember running out. And that was where like the first sense of like the victim mentality really kicked in. And I sincerely felt like I was going to die. And I asked myself, why is this happening? What did I do to deserve this? Am I really that bad of a person? Those are the 3 questions I remember vividly asking myself as I sat in my car, weeping to myself, trying to figure out how to move forward in my life. Because mind you, I was 21 by myself. I drove to the doctor's office that day because I just thought it was an MRI report from a head injury. My family is 14 hours north of me. And that was the news I received. Now, of course, I overcame that. I had surgery about week and a half after that. Went in 4 weeks later. the 4 screws, titanium screws they put in, the bone fused back together. I didn't know it only takes a month or so for your skull to fuse back together. And then I was back on my bike another week later. So total of 5 weeks out of surgery, I was back riding. Another 8 weeks after that, I was back in England competing. Moving forward, November 2012. So that was April 2010, the brain surgery. November 2012, I went through a treatment called gamma knife radiotherapy. Basically, a zap the 2 tumors that grew back. Now, my doctor explained 2 areas had grown back because once I got into the original surgery, the tumor was wrapped around an artery in my optic nerve. And so the surgery took like 6.5 hours. They thought it was going to be 4. But they couldn't risk hitting either of them because I could have had a stroke, become paralyzed, lost my vision, could have bled out and died then and there, and then a whole bunch of other risk factors. So they suggested radiation, and I didn't like that. And I found gamma knife, and because of that technology, non-invasive, it's like an MRI, does its magic. And the 2 areas shrunk for about 3 or 4 years and been stable ever since. 5 years later, coming off my best year competing, World Series, ended up 10th in the overall standings because I missed one of 5 points contests because I was recovering from my knee surgery. And it was just on cloud 9 going into 2017. 3 things happened. Before I competed in 2016, my main bike sponsor, my only bike sponsor, my main sponsor dropped me. Whole political drama issue there. And then going into 2017, my nutrition sponsor got bought out by a major corporation, dropped their sports or the athletic funding after we had a great year representing them. Amazing time. So that was 2 things. And then February came and 3rd brain tumor diagnosis. Right. Now, that was the one and only time I didn't feel sorry for myself. I wasn't angry. I wasn't confused. I just was like, all right, what do I do with this? How do I help other people? How do I help myself? And that's what led me down the path of walking away from my dream, starting a health coaching business, teaching people how to improve their health and performance through nutrition and exercise and mindfulness, and have been speaking for 2 years now and creating partnerships with brands around the messaging of optimizing your life, finding a massive intention to do so. And, instilling the belief in people by changing their perspective. I'm not trying to change someone's life, literally just trying to change someone's perspective because that's the catalyst to the rest. So I went from victim mentality to empowerment to I don't identify with that. I live with 4 brain tumors today. 3rd diagnosis, I didn't have any treatment, no medication, surgery. I followed the ketogenic diet the best I could. And now I'm a big advocate of a ketogenic lifestyle. But yeah, that's how I choose to see my life now. It's like things are happening for me, not to me. And then how can I benefit from this? How can I leverage that to benefit me? And then how can I help other people do so?
So you've still got the brain tumors at the moment? Yeah,
I live with 4. Some of them are about a blueberry size or smaller. So there's 2 on either side. The reason they suspect they're coming up is because of a genetic disorder called neurofibromatosis. And when they told me that in 2017, I instantly remembered epigenetics, how ketones themselves, whether you drink them exogenously or produce them in your liver from a high-fat, low-carb diet, which there's so many pieces that people don't understand, that it's actually easier to do than people think, if you're not trying to battle epilepsy or cancer. But them saying I had a genetic disorder, I remembered epigenetics, which is gene expression, how lifestyle affects that, stress affects that, mentally or physically from eating crap, processed food and alcohol, and overtraining. And so I followed that the best I could. And then year after year, MRIs show no progression. And I'm confident that we'll see either them stabilize like they have been forever, or we'll see them going the other way. But yeah, so I live with 4 of them today.
So can you remove them, or are they just going to be?
It's not worth the risk. I mean, the original tumor was so large, and it resulted in 2 areas coming back because the location, they couldn't risk hitting my optic nerve or the artery. And so at this point, even if they said, yeah, there's no risk in doing it, it's still invasive, it's still toxic, it's still stressful. Brain surgery is a TBI in its own. To me, it's not worth it. I don't need that. I know the power of my body and the power of my mind through all these different elements I'm practicing and learning more about. And I've been seeing it happen. And so even if they can, cut my skull open and remove them, but it's not going to be worth it. And it's going to cause more damage than good. So they agreed with that. But I people are like, oh, well, they ended up turning into cancer, like, or malignant tumors, would you have chemo or do this? So I was like, no, I would just tighten shit up more. I would probably meditate a lot more during the day. I would change my lifestyle dramatically rather than trying to toxicate myself. I don't know if that's the correct word, but go with toxic treatments that are proven to be only effective if your immune system can recover from it. So it's just why I do what I do. And I'm just so much more focused on what I do want. Because as you know, the brain doesn't know I don't want fill in the blank versus I do want fill in the blank. It just gives you whatever that sentence ends with. Like it just hardwires you to see that. So I just focus on what I want in my life, and I create systems and actions to get there.
You're true inspiration, man. Like that just literally put my life into perspective for me. You telling me that. And I think I appreciated that because I needed to hear, that my life's not all that bad. There are people out there that, do still live with things in their life that could potentially, be worse, but they're still living the best life they possibly can. And they found it within gratitude within themselves to actually do that. So, man, I just want to honor you for that, man. Like it grounded me. It was like a massive shock to the system right there. And I'm literally lost for words, my friend. Like I believe we could dive deep into the nutritional aspect as well, because that's something else that I'm passionate about talking and learning more about as well. But then I guess knowing more about your mindset and where it actually comes from. I think you've been very, very gracious with your time already. And hopefully we get to do this again. I have one question before I sort of let you go and eat your dinner. and that is, you've reached the age, I'm going to put a number on it, but you've reached the age of 100 and your friends have put together a mixtape for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. What do you want that mixtape to say and to show about your life?
I mean, I've thought about this so much, and like I just want people to say like, yeah, like Josh never gave up. Like he was always clear on his purpose to help other people and his vision. Like that's what my legacy I want it to be. And that's what I'm trying to do with other people. It's like I want them to see what's possible when you actually go after it, and when things happen, that doesn't define you. That's just an event. But what you put in your mind is forever. And so that's what I would want to be known for. And to your other points, we can have more conversations moving forward. You let me know. And to what you shared, I really appreciate you sharing that. But that's my belief of perspective. Like whatever you're experiencing right now, if you're breathing and you're able to hear this podcast, have a phone, not be hungry, or just be alive, it could be much worse. And Gary Vee always talks about like 400 trillion to 1 to be a living human being. It's like, you could be a tree. Like you could not be you. You could not have these thoughts. But recognizing those experiences, those feelings, those thoughts, those emotions, you're able to move forward. But if you're not feeling, you're not living. And so that's just something that I've gone through in the most dramatic cases as a human being that someone could ever imagine. I've hit those moments. And so that's one of my biggest missions, is to instill that perspective that it could always be worse. And I'd rather people not feel the pain on the level that I have to make that decision moving forward. So I'm really glad that you saw that and you felt that, and I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, like I said, we'll have more conversations. You just let me know when. Dude,
I've got so many more questions for you. I wish we had more time, seriously, because there's so much to unpack here and so much to your story. I feel like we haven't even really scratched the surface, which is great, and hopefully next time when we do connect and do get to speak, we get to go for a little bit longer and sort of dive into a little bit more. So I really appreciate you, Josh, and appreciate your mindset, your kindness, your heart. You're just being grateful for the fact that you are who you are in this present point in time. And that's valuable, man. a lot of young people listening to this, and even older people, they're going to get a lot out of it. And I got a lot out of it today. So really thankful. Thank you so much for coming on Storybox, my friend.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. I appreciate the opportunity. Like I said, like it's always amazing for me to share any aspect of my life and to have questions about it, because that's not something I ever fathomed being a part of my reality, was people be curious about who I am and what I've done. So I don't take that lightly. And like I said, I mean it. Like, you want to talk again, you just let me know. I love having these conversations because it's one step further to what I'm trying to accomplish in reaching people. So yeah, and I really appreciate the opportunity and for your kindness as well.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that too. Something that I want to do as well is reach as many people as I possibly can with your story, to help motivate, inspire, challenge me, and educate people that through stories that actually need it, because we can all relate in some way, shape or form to another person's story. We just got to think about it. We've got to hear it and just try and connect it in our own way. So I've been able to connect it in many, many ways to your story, mate. So definitely we'll connect. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.